Around 30,000 young men climbed into B-24 Liberators and never came back. That's not a statistic. That's an entire town's worth of sons, brothers, husbands, wiped out. Not because they gave up, not because they turned back, but because the machine they trusted couldn't always bring them home. By the war's end, half of every B-24 bomber ever built was gone. Crews called it the flying coffin. And today, we're going to show you why. But to understand how so many lives were gambled on this one airplane, we need to go back to the beginning. In 1939, with Europe on fire, the U.S. Army Air Corps wanted more than what it had. The B-17 Flying Fortress was already in the air, but it wasn't enough. America needed something faster, with longer legs, and carrying more bombs. Consolidated Aircraft took up the challenge. What they rolled out was the Model 32, soon to be designated the B-24 Liberator. Its secret weapon was a wing, the Davis wing. Thin, high-lift, revolutionary in design. Paired with a deep fuselage and twin-tail fins, it promised both range and efficiency. On paper, it looked like the bomber of the future. In practice, it would demand a price no one had calculated. By 1941, testing was done, and the B-24 was cleared for production. Then came Pearl Harbor, and America's war machine exploded into motion. The B-24 evolved quickly. Powered twin .50 caliber nose turrets, heavier armor, 12,000-pound maximum bomb loads. Everything pointed to an aircraft that could fly deeper, hit harder, and still come back. And it wasn't just about how it fought. It was how fast it could be built. The Willow Run factory in Michigan, designed by Ford, churned out Liberators at a speed never seen before. At its peak, one bomber rolled off the line every hour. By war's end, over 18,500 would be built, making it the most produced bomber of the entire conflict. On paper, America had found its workhorse. Faster than the B-17, carrying heavier loads, able to fly further into enemy territory. But on paper doesn't fight wars. Men do. And for the crews who would soon fly this new bomber into combat, the reality of the B-24 would prove far different from the promise. The Liberator's first missions weren't over cities. They were over oceans. In early 1942, before most Americans even knew its name, the B-24 was already flying with the Royal Air Force. Britain had ordered them before the prototype was finished, desperate for anything that could reach the mid-Atlantic air gap, where German U-boats were hunting convoys unopposed. No other aircraft could patrol that far. The Liberator could. Its range closed the gap, and soon U-boats that once surfaced in daylight were diving at the first glint of its silhouette. In the Battle of the Atlantic, the B-24's endurance helped turn the tide. Then came America's entry into the war. By mid-1942, the U.S. 8th Air Force in England was receiving its first B-24s. At first, they were mixed with B-17 groups. That didn't last long. The two bombers were too different. The Fortress cruised slower, climbed higher, and flew tighter. The Liberator was faster, lower, and looser. Flying side by side didn't work. The B-24s were split into their own divisions, 14 groups by the end of that year. They carried promise, but the losses started early. Like every heavy bomber, the Liberator bled men to flak and fighters. German Me-109s and FW-190s learned to pick them apart, aiming for the fuel tanks and thin wings. And sometimes, even the Allies couldn't tell friend from foe. There are confirmed cases of German captured B-24s being flown against Allied formations, sowing confusion before fighters dove in. Still, the Liberator fought across every theater, bombing Italy from North Africa, striking Axis industry from Britain, hunting shipping in the Pacific. Its range meant there was nowhere it couldn't reach. But for the men strapped inside, that reach came at a cost. The flaws they discovered weren't written in technical manuals. They were written in blood. From the outside, the B-24 looked like progress. Faster than the B-17. Longer range. Heavier payload. But inside the cockpit, the crews quickly learned the truth. The Liberator was a beast to fly. Its controls were heavy, brutally heavy. Holding formation meant constant effort on the yoke. Pilots swapped every 15 minutes just to keep their arms from giving out. And formation flying wasn't optional. In the skies over Germany, safety meant staying locked in tight combat boxes where every bomber's guns could cover the others. The B-17 could manage it. The B-24 couldn't. It wobbled, drifted, fought its pilot. German fighters noticed, and they hit Liberator formations first. Then there was the question of toughness. The flying fortress earned its name by limping home full of holes. The Liberator wasn't built the same way. Its thin Davis wings gave it lift and range, but at the cost of strength. A burst of flak or a cannon hit could rip a wing clean off. The twin-tail assembly was another weak spot. A single well-placed strike could shear the whole bomber into pieces. And if fire broke out, odds were grim. The fuel tanks were only partially self-sealing. Once hit, gasoline poured out and caught fire fast. The narrow 9-inch wide catwalk over the bomb bay was the only path between compartments. In a burning, spinning bomber, with parachutes snagging and suits bulking every movement, escape was nearly impossible. Many went down still strapped in. Water landings were no safer. Unlike the Fortress, which could sometimes float, the B-24 had a habit of breaking apart and sinking almost immediately. Crews drowned within sight of rescue aircraft. Even when enemy guns stayed silent, the Liberator had a reputation for betraying its own men. Engines quit without warning. Oil sprayed across windscreens. A landing gear failure could turn a safe return into a wreck. The men flying it gave everything they had, and sometimes everything they were, to keep it in the air. And still, the worst was yet to come. August 1st, 1943. 178 B-24 Liberators lifted off from airfields in Libya. Their target, 9 oil refineries in Ploiești, Romania, Hitler's fuel lifeline. If the refineries went up in flames, the Reich could be strangled of 60% of its oil supply. It was one of the most ambitious bombing missions of the war. And for many of the men climbing into their Liberators that morning, it would be their last. The plan was daring, even reckless. The bombers were ordered to fly low, dangerously low, across 2,400 miles of hostile territory. No altitude to shield them from flak. No margin for error. Just speed and surprise. General Louis Brereton assured his men, even if 50 planes were lost, the sacrifice would be worth it. The mission was doomed before it began. German spies had already tipped off the defenses, and bad luck struck fast. A lead aircraft with one of the key navigators crashed into the Mediterranean. Another turned back, leaving the formation disorganized. Clouds broke the groups apart. Radio silence was shattered by confusion. By the time the Liberators neared Ploiești, formations were scattered, navigation flawed, and German radar was watching every move. Then the flak opened up. Ploiești was ringed with anti-aircraft guns, hundreds of them. At treetop height, the bombers had no room to maneuver. They were hit from the ground, from the air, from every side. Liberators flew so low their gunners fired directly at German flak crews. One B-24 crashed straight into a gun battery, killing both the bomber crew and the men who had just shot them. Another slammed into a women's prison, killing scores of civilians. Smoke, fire, and exploding fuel tanks turned the sky into a furnace. By the end, the losses were staggering. 73 Liberators destroyed, over 500 airmen killed or wounded, another 100 captured. 5 medals of honor were awarded, 3 of them posthumously. For all the blood spilled, the damage was fleeting. Within weeks, the refineries were back in operation, producing even more fuel than before. Operation Tidal Wave was remembered not as a victory, but as a massacre. And for the men who survived, it proved the grim truth. In a B-24, the enemy wasn't always the greatest danger. Sometimes it was the plane itself. By the war's end, more than 18,500 B-24 Liberators had rolled off the assembly lines. No bomber was built in greater numbers. But numbers alone don't tell the story. Half of those planes never came back. Nearly 30,000 airmen died inside them. Crews remembered the Liberator with bitterness and respect in equal measure. It carried them further than any other bomber, but it carried far too many to their graves. When peace finally came, the B-24 disappeared almost overnight, scrapped to nothing. Only a handful survive today, ghosts of a machine that took as much as it gave.